Russia has been defined as a police state for centuries. For the past 20 years, the only pillar holding Putin's power in place has been that ruthless, all-seeing, all-crushing security apparatus. But today, in the final quarter of 2025, the Kremlin's seemingly impenetrable armor has not only cracked, the Russian police system has been virtually shattered. What we are about to tell you is not a retreat on the front lines or an economic downturn. This is the breaking of the backbone of the state by those who form that very backbone. An unprecedented panic began in Moscow when Russia's police, prosecutors, and even those feared intelligence officers collectively fled to the West, no longer willing to carry out Putin's orders. And as they fled, it is claimed that they took with them not only their suitcases, but also files that could potentially lead to the Putin regime being tried in The Hague. They are no longer Putin's guards, but are now considered star witnesses for the International Criminal Court, ICC. In other words, the situation in Russia resembles a scenario of internal conflict and collapse. With Russian police beginning to leave the country, the regime's stick has fallen from its hand. The streets are defenseless, the borders are porous, and the internal problems in the Kremlin's corridors are no longer paranoia, but have become mathematically possible. This exodus is not a simple wave of resignations, but is turning into a story of crew members stealing lifeboats from a sinking ship. So, how did the Russian police system problem reach this point? Data revealed by Olga Romanova, founder of the Sitting Russia Foundation and a reliable source, lays bare the gravity of the situation. Those fleeing are not ordinary patrol officers. Among them are high-level investigators from the Central Office of the Investigative Committee of the Russian Federation, the equivalent of Ukraine's State Investigation Bureau. Romanova mentions a high-ranking defector she knows personally who is currently in the West, probably in the United Kingdom, writing a thesis on human rights violations in Russia. Just think, a person who investigated the regime's most important cases and was privy to the state's most confidential secrets is now spilling those secrets to Western intelligence and the academic world. Even more striking is the situation of high-level officials who have escaped from the Russian prison service, the FSIN or Federal Penitentiary Service. Romanova confirms that 4 high-level officials from this institution are currently testifying at the International Criminal Court. These men are individuals who personally witnessed orders for the systematic torture of Ukrainian civilians and prisoners of war in Russian prisons. Their testimonies appear far more devastating than UN reports because they were not observers of the system from the outside, but the very cogs turning the system. Now they are describing how those cogs were greased with blood. So why has the panic caused by the collapse of the Russian police system erupted now? The answer lies in the economic and psychological costs of the war in Russia. A patrol officer's salary averages 38,000 rubles, or about $380. This figure is claimed to be lower than even the earnings of a supermarket cashier in Moscow. Meanwhile, Putin is offering signing bonuses of up to 200,000 rubles and high salaries to those who agree to join the army. A police officer sees his colleague at the next desk going to the front and earning 5 times his salary, or a worker in the defense industry living much more comfortably than he does. The result is a historic personnel shortage. Even Interior Minister Vladimir Kolokholtsev was forced to admit the situation. According to the Ukrainian local media source Kyiv Post, there is a massive personnel shortage of 172,000 in the Russian Interior Ministry. According to the To Be Precise study, more than a third of police positions in Russia are vacant. In some regions, particularly east of the Ural Mountains and in the North Caucasus, the police force has shrunk by 50% over the past 5 years. In some remote districts, the vacancy rate even reaches 90%. There are no longer any police in villages in rural Russia. In some cities in the Leningrad region, a single patrol officer is trying to do the work that was previously done by 7 officers. As St. Petersburg criminologist Ekaterina Kodzeva points out, the public security system's workforce is completely depleted. From domestic violence to street fights, from theft to fraud, the police, which is the citizen's first point of contact with the state, no longer goes to the scene of the incident because there is no one to go. This void is not just a statistical data point. It is described as the moment when Putin's promise of order and stability was virtually wiped out. The Russian police who are fleeing are not just fleeing low salaries. According to Olga Romanova, many of those who flee are doing so out of fear of being part of an aggressive state and potentially being sent to the front lines and ordered to torture Ukrainians. In other words, Russian police officers now see that the system is rotting from within and are jumping ship before the roof collapses on them. So what happens when police stations are emptied? Authority does not tolerate a vacuum. The void left by the state is filled with chaos and private violence. The current situation in Russia looks exactly like this. Uncontrolled chaos is observed on the streets. As the war enters its fourth year, Russian society is undergoing a horrific transformation. According to local Ukrainian media sources such as Kyiv Post, it is claimed that approximately 500,000 veterans returning from the front are coming back not only with their medals, but also with severe trauma and most importantly with the weapons they brought with them. These men, according to Kyiv Post, come from a hell where violence is the only solution. And upon their return, they find neither psychological support nor jobs that pay their military salaries. As a result, murders, assaults, and armed robberies involving former Russian soldiers have exploded, especially in urban areas in the south and east. Even more dangerous is the Russian people's reaction to this climate of insecurity. According to reports by the Jamestown Foundation, residents of the Russian Federation are arming themselves at an unprecedented rate since the start of the invasion of Ukraine. It is estimated that there are currently more than 20 million weapons in the hands of the non-public sector, including Russian citizens. And these weapons are much more lethal military-grade equipment than in the past. This arms race is erupting at a very critical time and in critical locations. Migrants from Central Asia and the Caucasus and people in Russia's autonomous republics are stockpiling weapons to protect themselves against rising Russian nationalism and police violence. Moscow's harsh stance towards migrants and its disproportionate deployment of them to the front lines seems to have pushed these groups into self-defense mode. Russian security commentators such as Sergei Ishchenko claimed that a significant portion of Russia's 7 million migrants are now ready to defend their traditions with weapons in hand. On the other hand, radical nationalist groups like the Russian Community are forming paramilitary militia forces to deliver their own justice where the police fall short. State law enforcement agencies are forced to cooperate with these groups because they don't have enough personnel. This is seen as the clearest evidence that the state has lost its monopoly on violence. Security in Russia is no longer provided by the police, but by whoever has the most powerful weapons. A concrete example illustrating how explosive this situation is occurred recently in Transbaikal. When police went to a house to carry out an eviction, the homeowner responded by opening fire instead of opening the door, wounding several officers. Such incidents unimaginable 10 years ago have now become almost commonplace within Russia's borders. As Jamestown analysts warn, if this kind of resistance spreads to non-Russian regions, it will become impossible for the Kremlin to find police to carry out its orders. Considering all these details, we understand more clearly that Russia has not returned to the dark days of the 1990s, but has been dragged into a much worse process. They may face a scenario of internal unrest where everyone is armed and the state has collapsed. The Russian police force is playing a game of whack-a-mole, trying to put out a fire in one place while 5 more fires break out elsewhere. And the water to put out these fires, personnel, is no longer available. This fire on the streets has also begun to heat up the Kremlin's walls. What we see in the bigger picture is not just a law and order problem. It is Vladimir Putin's strategic isolation and paranoia. The most concrete manifestation of this isolation is what has happened to Sergei Lavrov, the face of Russian diplomacy for 30 years. Lavrov is not attending the OSCE Ministerial Council meeting for the first time since 2022. He was stripped of his role as head of the delegation at the G20 summit and was not sent to the ASEAN summit. According to Reuters, this isolation stems from US President Donald Trump canceling a planned summit with Lavrov. Allegedly, Trump on the advice of Marco Rubio refused the meeting, uncomfortable with Lavrov's ultimatum-like language. Lavrov's sidelining in this way may indicate that Putin's last rational link with the outside world has been severed. It now appears that Putin is listening to his own echo chamber of approving teams, rather than experienced diplomats like Lavrov. However, on the diplomatic chessboard, Russia is now in a tight spot like a king who has lost his queen. Inside the country, paranoia has reached unimaginable levels. Instead of dealing with real threats such as terrorists and criminal gangs, the FSB is hunting down Russian scientists. A new decree prohibits Russian scientists from working with foreigners without FSB approval. The brightest minds, such as Anatoly Maslov and Alexander Shiplyuk, who are working on hypersonic missile technology, are being arrested on charges of treason. Physicist Yaroslav Kudryavtsev made some very important statements on this matter. Yaroslav Kudryavtsev said that this is sabotage by the authorities against their own science. Putin, in the name of protecting secrets, is destroying the brains that produce those secrets. This is strategic suicide. So with everything going so badly, the economy showing signs of collapse, the police fleeing, and diplomats being kicked out, why doesn't Putin stop? And why doesn't he sit down at the table? As Medium's excellent analysis points out, the Russian regime is a survival machine, and the fuel for this machine is constant conflict. Putin seems to be under a great delusion. The Russian army's losses are so great that stopping and admitting defeat would spell its political and physical end. He must believe that the next hand will bring the big jackpot, even though he knows the chips on the table are gone. Putin's elites are also caught up in this spiral of fear. Everyone sees the ship sinking, but no one wants to be the first to board the lifeboat because they know that whoever makes the first move will be crushed by the FSB. However, this silence stems not from loyalty, but from terror. And history teaches us this. Loyalty built on fear evaporates at the first major shock. What Putin fears is not NATO tanks. His nightmare is the union of angry soldiers returning from the front with their weapons, police officers who haven't been paid, and a population on the brink of starvation, just as in 1917. That is why the 30% personnel shortage in the Ministry of Internal Affairs is more dangerous to Putin than any front line in Ukraine. Because that gap is the breach where the regime is defenseless against its own people. This picture in Russia is inevitable, and the data does not lie. While Russia seeks victory in the Ukrainian plains, it has lost the keys to its own house. The police force is a state's immune system, and Russia's immune system is collapsing. The flight of security forces to testify in The Hague is not just a personnel issue. It means the regime's legitimacy has been destroyed. While Putin wants to freeze Ukraine, he seems to have thrown his own country into the fire of an internal problem. The streets are arming themselves. Tensions are rising, and the state's protective shield is melting away a little more every day. This war is no longer just between Ukraine and Russia. This war appears to be between Russia's own future and its own past. And it seems that the Kremlin has been unable to prevent this war from spiraling out of control. Look, what we have described so far is about how a state's security apparatus is eroding. However, the real destruction wrought by Putin's war machine is now being felt not only in police stations, but also in the radiators of the Russian people. As Russia's security bureaucracy collapses, a second silent, but far more deadly problem center has opened up simultaneously, namely the infrastructure front. For years, Putin threatened to cut off natural gas to Europe and freeze them out. Remember in those infamous propaganda videos, they mocked Europe saying it would freeze. But history responded with incredible irony. Today, it is not Europe that is freezing. Today, it is Moscow's own suburbs that are freezing. Russia's massive central heating system, known as Kommunalka, dates back to the Soviet era and can no longer withstand metal fatigue. The war economy, that is the process of industrial collapse, did not just steal workers from civilian factories. This process also swallowed up the maintenance and repair budgets of cities, as well as the welders and engineers needed to repair the pipelines. So what was the result? From Podolsk to Vladivostok, hundreds of thousands of Russian citizens found themselves refugees in their own homes in sub-zero temperatures. This is also a violation of the last clause of that unwritten sacred agreement between Putin and the people. The people had given up their freedom in exchange for stability and a warm home. Now they have no freedom, no security, and no gas to heat their homes. In a country that is the world's largest energy exporter, people freezing to death is not a management error. It is proof of how perverse the regime's priorities have become. While the Kremlin spends millions of dollars on missiles that will destroy a Ukrainian village, it cannot or will not find $100 to repair a burst water pipe for its own citizens. And the danger is not limited to the cold. What happens in a place where the police have withdrawn, the state has cut off funding, and the infrastructure has collapsed? Central authority evaporates and is replaced by regional fiefdoms. Right now, when you look at the map of the Russian Federation, you see a single country, but on the ground the situation is very different. We mentioned that huge void in the police force. That void is already being filled by private security companies and militias financed by local governors. The autonomous model Ramzan Kadyrov established in Chechnya, essentially a state within a state, is now becoming a role model for other regions. Elites in resource-rich regions from Tatarstan to Yakutia are sensing Moscow's weakening. As a result, Putin set out under the pretext of cleansing Ukraine, but ultimately brought Russia to the point of cleansing itself of Muscovites. If money isn't coming from the center, if security isn't being provided from the center, why should local elites obey Moscow's orders? This question is currently the most dangerous one being whispered behind closed doors. It seems that Putin defined the collapse of the USSR as the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the century. Ironically, however, with the hyper-centralized and resource-consuming war machine he has built, the Russian leader is dragging the Russian Federation toward the inevitable end of the USSR in 1991. Like a truck with a broken brake, Russia now seems to be losing not just one war, but simultaneously the war on the front lines, security on the streets, warmth at home, and authority over the regions. And while all this is happening, Putin still looks at maps and thinks he is expanding his borders. However, the ground beneath the Russian leader's feet is already slipping away. So, what do you think about this?